Hi, good morning, and welcome to Kunsang Payal Choling. We're so happy to have you, and happy to be sharing a teaching by Jetsunma Ahkon. This teaching was given in 1991. The title is Personal Ethics in Buddhism, and we will begin.
In listening to the hearings that have been going on, and not wishing to get political in any regard, I still, in listening to these different issues, it is amazing how somehow in our getting caught up with the sophistication of our society and the elaborate ideas we develop about what's fair and what's not, and how to organize debate, and how to take these complaints and how to formulate them and how to hear them, and how to structure hearings such as that. It is amazing to me that we forget sometimes the simplest truths, which are like kindness, which are the equality of people, that one's consideration should be equal to another one's consideration. Simple honesty, simple personal ethics. Sometimes we can see our own political leaders, sometimes, frequently I think, we can see our own political leaders talk out of two sides of their mouths, can't we? Say one thing under one set of circumstances and turn around and say another thing under another set of circumstances. I believe that I saw some of the panel of judges who were listening to these arguments act in that way. And it's amazing to me that somehow in our sophistication we lose this simple sense of personal ethics, which is such, in the Buddhist tradition really, is such a cornerstone to our practice. In the Buddhist tradition, there are many different levels at which one can practice, and sometimes when visitors come to the temple, they look at these people over here sitting in these robes and they think, maybe I shouldn't practice here, because if I have to look like them when I practice, maybe I won't do that. Or sometimes they realize that very few of the core students in this temple have had a free weekend for maybe 3 or 4 years now. No, that's not true. But whenever there's a project going on, it seems as though there's a tremendous amount of activity, and there's a lot of activity that has to go on an ongoing basis just to maintain this temple and to keep things going. So there's a tremendous commitment, really, in being involved in a very kind of hardcore way in this temple. And sometimes, we become a little bit overwhelmed thinking that it has to be like that. But in fact, the Buddha teaches us that different sentient beings have different focuses in their practice. That, in fact, the Buddha himself taught many different levels of practice, from the most logical, reasonable, and accessible, simplest level of Buddhism that we now call the Theravadan level, where there are certain just pretty cut and dry rules that one would follow of conduct, and a certain logic that goes with those rules. And then the more elaborate development of Mahayana thinking, which includes the idea of compassion and actually modifies some of the previous rules or develops them further. A good, for instance, of that is that, for instance, for a Theravadan monk, being a celibate monk, would never touch a female, and therefore, if a female were to hand him food, in order to avoid any desire or any touching, the monk would not not accept the food directly from a female. In the Mahayana tradition, that is modified due to the idea of compassion. It isn't changed, but it's developed, meaning that if even the most strictly ordained celibate monk were to see a female who were in some way suffering or falling down or needed some help, that monk would actually be required, due to compassion, to pick her up and hold her and take her to some help, like take her to a doctor or minister to her in some way. So that idea becomes modified by compassion. In the Vajrayana tradition, that idea is further modified in that monks and nuns, they are still celibate and they maintain strict celibacy, but they view each other differently, not as objects of desire that one would reject in that regard, but rather even a monk would think of any female, whether it be laywoman or an ordained nun, as an emanation of the primordial wisdom Buddha Tara, the primordial mother, and therefore making her a goddess or a Buddha, a female Buddha. And so one would not avoid the female, but would think of the female as being something very precious. Of course, one would still remain celibate, and the idea is that one still renounces the idea of the ordinary female being desirable, but one does so by thinking of the female as being the enlightened essence, the Buddha nature, the goddess. So in a sense the same rules are followed, but they are followed for different reasons and with a different mind set. So that's an interesting phenomena that happens within the path. The path can be practiced at many different levels, even in terms of Vajrayana, and this is the Vajrayana tradition, the most elaborate and really profound and complicated level of practice. Even in the Vajrayana tradition, there are very many levels of practice that one could engage in. One could simply try to hold the view of the equality of all that lives, of compassionate activity, therefore, and simply hold the view that all sentient beings are the Buddha. Try to hold that pure view. Try to see in that regard. And in holding that pure view, could only do a simple practice like the repetition of the mantra Om Mani Padme Hum. Just that simple practice. Just to take one's mala and for some period of time a day, with high regard, with pure view and with devotion, would recite Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum, and dedicate the merit of that practice to the liberation and salvation of all sentient beings equally. That's still a valid practice. That is a Vajrayana practitioner. On the other hand, one might take robes, as this community has done, and in taking robes become wholly and completely involved in the temple, to be utterly responsible for the propagation of Dharma, utterly responsible for the upkeep of the temple, totally committed in a profoundly involved way, which includes total renunciation of many normal, quote, aspects of life as we see it in the Western civilization. And then in the mid-range, there are lay people who do a great deal of practice, perhaps a half an hour to an hour, perhaps a couple of hours a day, and those lay people might be part of the community that is very, very supportive and very involved with the temple. There are as many different levels of involvement in one's practice as there are minds to encompass that practice. So it is according to one's karma, it is according to one's faith, it is according to one's desire, it is according to one's aptitude, it is according to one's inclination. There are many different levels of practice. But one of the pitfalls of practice actually can come about at the most complicated level. Sometimes we can engage in practice and in the Vajrayana level of practice, once again, the practice can be very complicated and very ornate. One can become very involved. It can be necessary to practice if you wish to accomplish a certain level of practice. It can become necessary to take retreat, extensive retreat, sometimes solitary retreat. It can become necessary to practice for a certain amount of hours every day. one's involvement with one's practice can become very, very demanding. And it may also become necessary to take a great deal of teaching, to be required to understand a certain level of teaching. There is a certain commitment that one must make. One must agree to take those teachings whenever they are available. One must take empowerment. One must take commentary teaching. One must receive lung transmission. One must take vows. There are so many different things that one must do that one becomes caught up with the complicated aspect of one's practice. One becomes caught up in thinking that this is what one's practice is about. One's practice is about dressing up as a practitioner, whether it be in robes or in a lay person's practice garment, a chuba such as what I'm wearing. And then sitting in a very austere position and doing one's beads, and counting one's beads and maybe throwing rice around and doing one's mandala practice and accumulating lindro and doing prostrations and looking ever so elegant when we do it, and keeping the liturgical calendar associated with Buddhism and doing sok, that is the food practices on certain days, and one has to become thinking about this. One gets caught up with this. It becomes very interesting the way that one's mind is caught up with this, doing the Dharma dance and singing the Dharma song and walking the walk and all of that stuff. In fact, one can become so caught up in that, sometimes so caught up in the romance of Dharma, because it is exotic, it's different. This is not what they do in Presbyterian churches around. So it becomes an exotic thing. One becomes so caught up in that one forgets that the foundational basis of the path rests on simple, philosophical, ethical structure. I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen where students will take many, many teachings. They will go to Nepal, and in Nepal they will dress very, in such a way as to be easily spotted as Dharma practitioners. They will have the best set of beads you've ever seen. And they will learn how to throw their Zen around so masterfully. And they will walk around looking so lordly. I always tease Camille, one of our monks, who walks around looking so lordly. And I'm hoping that his practice matches up with his lordliness. I think so, but one never knows. But anyway, they get really caught up with that, and they always see the best Rinpoches. They go to the best teachers, and they see all the best stuff, and they just go to all the best pilgrimage places. But they're not particularly kind, They're not particularly outgoing in their kindness. They can be very, I've seen that, and that they can be very haughty, very self-righteous. In fact, I remember when I went to India and Nepal, I was not at all thrilled with the practitioners that I saw in Kathmandu, generally. And of course, this is a generalization. There were some there that were very, very sincere. But generally, I was not that impressed with what I saw. And it was immediately after I had been recognized as a tulku, as a reincarnate Lama. And after that time, it seemed like the word of that spread throughout the Tibetan community much faster than it did throughout the American community in Nepal, so that the Tibetan people were very, accepting, and they were very open about it. And even some Tibetan women would come up to me and lower their heads for a blessing or something like that. I had no idea what to do with that, none whatsoever. I just could not believe this was happening to me. I was mortally embarrassed. I thought about wearing a mask when I went out. But anyway, everywhere I went, they would say, "Inji tulku, Inji tulku." That means white American person, tulku. And so I would cringe when I heard that. But the Americans were much more haughty, much more haughty. In fact, I remember when we were leaving Kathmandu, I had just bought a new mala. And I hadn't, with malas, usually you just get the beads, so you don't get all this fancy stuff on it. You just get the beads, and then you take it home and you restring it, and you put markers on it and little doodads on it, and you kind of personalize it and make it your own. And then it looks like a first-class mala, the kind that you can walk around in Nepal and be real proud of. Anyway, I hadn't done that yet. See, I bought this new mala, and it was a Bodhi seed mala, and I was real happy with it because they were nice seeds, but I hadn't restrung them, so I just had the mala with no markers. And it was just on some nasty old string like the kind they sell in Kathmandu. And it didn't have any, like, crystals or Buddhas or any fancy stuff on it. And so how embarrassing. I was walking around just doing some simple practice on this little mala, you know. And I remember there at the Kathmandu airport, some American guy apparently was going on a trip, and he had long hair, and he was wearing a Zen, and he looked very much like the practitioner. And I was ever so impressed with him. And his mala was done properly. And he looked over to his friend, and he said, "I bet she thinks she's a real practitioner." And I thought to myself, this is, you know, geez, I don't know what to say, but you get the picture, don't you? The point is that the first thing that one should accomplish when one practices the Dharma is the philosophy that the Buddha taught. And the Buddha teaches us, first of all, that all sentient beings are equal. That no, you do not go by appearances. Appearances are nothing. Even the differences in the Vajrayana tradition, the differences between male and female, for instance, are ridiculous in that males have been females before and they will be females. So, you know, if you don't think of females as your equal, guess what's going to happen to you next time? We're going to get you. You know, just feel like they're not equal or feel like better. You know, now is a day and age when sometimes females walk around with little buttons that say all men are, and they will be male. And it's the same with people of different nationalities, different races, different religions. When you think about the great cosmic wheel of death and rebirth, there is no room for any of that head tripping that we do about the differences between beings. In fact, if you really accomplish the Buddha's teachings, you can pick up a cockroach and think, there, but for the grace of practice, go I. Because according to the Buddha's teachings, all sentient beings are equal. They are all equally the Buddha nature, and that if one's mind, you know, has the clarity, or lack of clarity, I should say, the ignorance or the delusion equal to the mind of a cockroach, guess what you get to be next time? It's really according to the clarity of one's mind. It's according to the accomplishment that one has accumulated as to what life form one takes rebirth in. And that is not always predictable according to the Buddha's teaching. Even if one has accumulated a great deal of virtue and merit, if by some unfortunate circumstance it happens that at the time of one's death one is feeling hatred and anger, and sometimes we do, you know, if perhaps maybe our death arrives at an unfortunate time due to someone killing us. One never knows if that could happen by a car accident or something like that. At that moment we might feel hatred and anger toward the person who has harmed us in that. If we feel hatred and anger at the time of our death, it will most certainly influence our rebirth. The Buddha teaches us that we might take rebirth in a life form of some kind that is based on the precept and that totally embraces the idea of hatred and anger. And then what will we be? Maybe some beast that kills for the fun of it. And there are, in nature, like cats, for instance, will play with their victims and really enjoy that kind of thing. So really, we should look at all sentient beings and we should consider them equal, and we should hold them in the highest respect and feel nothing but compassion for any of their conditions, because they are equal to us without exception. Their condition is such as to be merely an unfortunate ripening, perhaps, to some degree. And if we have the good fortune to practice, we should never be haughty about that, because that haughtiness will bring no good result. But instead, we should practice for their sake. Practice meaning that we dedicate, we actually accomplish some practice, that we do some meditation, and we dedicate the merit or value of that practice to the liberation and salvation of all sentient beings. Hopefully, if we were in a tight pinch, someone might do that for us. In fact, if we ourselves are receiving Dharma teachings, then you can bet your bottom dollar that at some point somebody did. So we should think of all sentient beings as being equal. We have to adapt this simple, basic ethical structure. And that ethical structure has to be based on cause and effect relationships. The Buddha teaches us that all phenomena that we experience are actually cause and effect relationships that interdependently arise. And they begin and bear fruit within our perceptual process, within our own mind. That means to say that if we are experiencing some particular suffering, well, that suffering is occurring within our perceptual experience. You can see how that is, don't you? It's not happening in someone else's perceptual experience. It's happening in ours. If we experience poverty or hunger, it is our perceptual experience that is occurring there. And the Buddha teaches us that if that is so, then it is due to, in the past, perhaps having some lack of generosity, to where we ourselves might have seen someone who was hungry or needy in some way, and we did not respond. Or in fact, we contributed to their hunger or neediness. Perhaps if we ourselves experience in this lifetime that not too many people like us, that we're constantly rejected, that nobody really takes us seriously. Perhaps that might be that because, and that again is our own experience. And it might even differ from other people's experience of what they think we should be experiencing. That also happens. But it is our experience, and it does occur within our minds. If the fruit is within our mind, then the seed must be within our mind also. And the seed could have occurred a very long time ago. It could have occurred aeons ago. Perhaps at some time we did not take into account the validity of other sentient beings, their importance, their sacredness, their well-being. We didn't think about them. We didn't much care. Perhaps something so simple that, we lived in a place where we noticed the poor, and the poor reached out to us in some way, and we didn't respond, and we didn't take their need as being serious. We didn't listen to them. Perhaps we were the kind of authoritarian father figure that didn't listen to the needs of our children. Perhaps it was that simple. Nothing as dramatic as not feeding the poor. Perhaps we just didn't listen to our kids. Perhaps it was that simple. But whatever it is, it ripens in an exacting way. That is to say that if we are lonely, we were not friends in the past. If we are poor or needy, perhaps we were not generous in the past. So we are taught as Buddhists that the basis of our practice, no matter what level we're practicing at, has to be this foundational ethical system. And of course, the focus of that ethical system must be the respect, a healthy respect for karma, cause and effect, and simple kindness. The Buddha teaches us that if we practice simple kindness and have simple respect for all that lives, for all sentient beings, that's like planting a seed that will later on in the future result as joy and happiness, even for ourselves. And that doesn't even take into account the blessing that it brings to the world. If we were all just simply, ethically, morally upright, how different our world would be. If we were just ethical, not even religious, if we were just ethical, our world would be a completely different place. No one would be hungry. No one would be poor. No one would be slighted. No one would be lonely if we were just ethical. So if the only aspect of religion that we adapt is a sense of weighing out and really creating a structure of personal ethics, that's something. At least you can say your religion is kindness, and that's what His Holiness the Dalai Lama says. My main religion is kindness. But we don't even adapt that. We get so complicated in our exotic religious thing, that we forget that the basis is just the ethical structure of kindness. Interestingly, the Buddha goes on to teach us other cause and effect relationships that we don't take into regard. For instance, if we are especially physically beautiful, physically attractive, and that, you don't have to look at yourself in the mirror and say, well, I'm not classically beautiful, my nose is too funny, or maybe I don't have real good hair, or maybe, I don't know, my cheek structure is a little off, but it doesn't have to be like that. You don't have to be a classical beauty. Classical beauties change as styles change. But if you have good physical structure, your body looks good, it seems healthy, one's face is attractive, one's demeanor is attractive, one's attitude is attractive, one has a certain sort of physical charisma, a certain appearance that overall is attractive. If one has that kind of physical beauty, then the Buddha teaches us that in the past we actually must have done something with our bodies, and specifically with our bodies, that was very virtuous or meritorious. That could take many forms, but generally it is considered that we have good body karma. Good body karma. People that are very healthy, attractive, beautiful, pleasing to look at, have good body karma. That could take many forms. Now, one of the teachings that the Buddha gives us is that if we take robes, then in a future lifetime our bodies will be beautiful. Because having taken the robes and practiced the virtue of celibacy and renunciation and pure living and that sort of thing, one has accumulated a good storehouse of merit on the level of body. One actually has good body karma. But that isn't the only way in which one can achieve such merit. If one were to say, let's say, to keep commitments with one's body, pure commitments with one's body, that is to say, if one were to keep themselves pure in such a regard as to, let's say, within the context of like marital relationships, if one were to not commit adultery, if one were to be pure, then one would accumulate virtue or merit with one's body. If one were to use one's body to benefit others, that is to say, to do some physical work that is helpful or alleviates the suffering of others, to use one's body like that. I think about Mother Teresa and her nuns that actually clean floors for poor people and, really use their bodies to pick up starving people out of the street and carry them off and feed them. Then they accumulate wonderful, auspicious body karma. And also, if one were to use one's physical appearance in order to be of benefit to others, that's to say, I think of bodhisattvas, that is to say, awakening beings, those who are awakening beings who actually appear in the world in a very seductive and beautiful form, and there are teachings that there are such beings as that appear in the world in a seductive and beautiful form, and they use that beauty in order to basically seduce sentient beings into a spiritual life, seduce them to practice, then that is a way to accumulate virtue and merit on the physical level, and they will in the future be very beautiful. But even something as simple as not engaging in promiscuous behavior, that is to say, not jumping from partner to partner to partner and engaging in promiscuous behavior, and also being true and practicing fidelity and loyalty within the context of a committed relationship. Even something as simple as that, as ordinary as that, just having that kind of sense of personal ethics will create in the future physical beauty. So we have to look at something that seems to be not a part of one's spiritual life. You don't think of rolling up your sleeves and using your body to alleviate the suffering of others as being a real highfalutin kind of spiritual practice. You don't think of it that way. And you think, I've seen this, I've seen this where there are sentient beings who are Dharma practitioners actually, who actually engage in Dharma practice, but they're promiscuous, and they're not even, they don't use their bodies appropriately. They use their bodies in a very promiscuous way. It doesn't match. It doesn't go. There's nothing to that. How can one be a Dharma practitioner and think like that? Because the Buddha teaches us that we are not honoring the cause and effect relationships that ensure future benefit, future practice. So what good does it do to sit around looking real highfalutin with your fancy mala and you don't have a sense of personal ethics? What's the point? I think that at some point in our practice we have to kind of get real. We have to really take a good, hard look at ourselves and see what it is that we're all about and what it is that we want to do. If we're Dharma practitioners or if we're just spiritual people, just generally spiritual people that want to meditate, that want to practice, it seems to me that by implication we are stating that we wish to achieve some spiritual result. We want to grow spiritually. We want to achieve enlightenment. If we're Dharma practitioners, we're making no bones about it. We are going for Buddhahood. We are taking the express train. We are on the train even now. And we are putting ourselves to the test, We are trying to achieve enlightenment. We're not taking a stop along the way. We are going on the red line, going for the last stop. How can a poor sense of personal ethics agree with that? How can anything agree with that? How can we do like that? How can we think like that? As spiritual people, we have to begin great laws of cause and effect. We have to examine them. Without exception, every major world religion gives us a sense of personal ethics to live by. Isn't that true? Can we all agree on that? We are given the 10 Commandments as Jews and Christians. The Quran has a tremendous set of values and laws that have to be held to. Hinduism has a tremendous sense of laws and values. Unfortunately, in some of the religions, especially those at the level of popular practice, it isn't explained to us why that's so. It's said to us, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, but we don't know why. Because it will get done unto you as you did to others. You have to go a little further maybe and explain that. But we don't understand why. We just hear this and we go, okay. And when we can remember it, we try to remember it. But we can't mostly remember it very often. Because we're mostly thinking about ourselves most of the time. And then we hear, do not kill. Okay. But we don't know why. We don't know that, according to the Buddha, we're not supposed to kill. And we're not supposed to kill because if we kill any sentient being, in the future, that will result in our own death. Cause and effect, you can't argue with it. That's the way it is. We try to purify it with our practice, but death results in death. The seed results in the fruit, always. And it's the same seed, same fruit. Apples don't make bananas. Apple seeds don't make banana trees. And likewise, the Buddha teaches us that if we kill sentient beings, that means if we make it a habit to step on every bug in our path, then actually we are diminishing our own life force. Because death results in death. If we want to strengthen our life force, we'll do everything that we can to save the lives of sentient beings. Now think about Mother Teresa. She's an excellent example of that. She's in her 70s or something, isn't she? She's still picking them up from the streets and carrying them off. She can still do that. This is human beings, human bodies. Probably weigh almost as much as she does. So we have to think about this great law of cause and effect, and we have to think about it within the context of our lives. We have to look at ourselves in our homes. How do we treat our families? What is our spiritual, ethical conduct, personal conduct like? Is it honorable within the context of our families? Are we true to our spouses? Are we kind? What do we do with our children? I once read a column. I wish I had it with me. I'm not a good joke rememberer, and so I won't do this any justice. But I remember it was a column by Irma Bombach, and she did kind of a little routine on what it would be like if we treated adults the way we treat our children. Let's say that sometimes the neighborhood children will come over and eat lunch with our children. What if we treated adult guests to dinner the same way that we treat neighborhood children who come to eat with our children? Take off your shoes and don't get any mud on the floor. Now, don't make a mess. Can you imagine saying that to your guests as they walked in? And be quiet. Get your elbows off the table and don't spill. You spilled. Clean it up. What if we treated our guests that way? Of course, we would never treat adult humans that way. But we treat we treat human children that way. We have to think about that within our homes. And then we have to it's that simple. We have to get down to those kinds of bare-bone basics. And then we should think about, what do you do with adult people when you disagree with them? Do you send them to their room? Do you wrap them upside the head? You wouldn't get very far in life if you wrapped them upside the head every time you disagreed with them. That wouldn't work very well. That would shorten your lifespan. I don't know that that's a direct teaching of the Buddha, but it seems to me that would shorten your lifespan eventually. And then I think about, in the workplace, in the work environment. We steal things from the work environment, don't we? Paper clips. Take a few paper clips. Who's going to miss it? We do what we can to get ahead, and that means to say that sometimes we don't exactly let the people that we are competing with come forth in the best light. Sometimes we compete with them and try to show a better face to our superiors. Sometimes we're not fair. Sometimes we're not very kind. Sometimes we don't do our part. Sometimes we let others pick up the ball. Sometimes we let others work harder than we do. Sometimes we collect the same salary as somebody else, but we let the other person do most of the work. Sometimes in the work environment we engage in personal conduct and perhaps flirty or promiscuous behavior, knowing that the people that we are engaging in this behavior with perhaps have families and marriages of their own. We don't have very good ethics, very good spiritual ethics in the work environment. And then we should think about our ethical structure in the community at large. Do we really participate in the community in such a way as to really hold to the view that we are equal, and that means that our happiness is as important as the happiness of others, not more and not less. Do we participate in our community in that way? Seeming in that way, acting in that way. Do we do that? We have to really examine our ethical structure in a personal, family, work environment, community, and world at large structure. How do we measure up? The basis of that, remember, is the equality of all that lives. All that lives is equal. The appearance is different, but that has more to do with our perceptual process structure than it actually has to do with any level of reality. You see? Because it seems that things are different. It seems that this glass of water to me, again, seems small. It's not a big glass of water. But to an ant, it's huge. And it's like that with our perceptions that we have of one another. One person's meat is another person's poison. I might look at one person and think that, chemically, just generally, I don't get along with that person. I don't think that much of that person's personality. It's just not the kind of personality that I click with very well. But to another person, that person might seem like the best thing since sliced bread. It's just a matter of perceptual process. And one person may seem very, very beautiful to me, and I've had that happen, that I say to another person, gee, isn't he or she beautiful? And the person I'm talking to will look at me like, are you okay? Do you have eye drops or something you can put in? Maybe you have a little dust in your eyes or something. And that has happened to me where I've had someone say to me, gee, isn't he or she beautiful? And I've gone, no. But I'm glad you're happy. So, I mean, it's a matter of taste, it's a matter of perceptual process. The underlying reality is that all sentient beings are of equal value. Equal value. Can we get that? I mean, can we really walk into maybe, we feel ourselves to be so sophisticated and so well-to-do that we're doing very well in our lives. By the time you get to be my age, you think, well, I'm sitting pretty now. I'm doing okay. Sometimes we develop that kind of arrogant attitude. Can we go into the poorest of poor places in the world? Can we look at people who are not well-educated, who are not well-dressed, who are not well-spoken, who are not well? Can we look at them and say, they have equal weight to me? Can we truthfully do that? If we can't do that, we have not accomplished our practice. Now, don't pretend you can do that. You know you can't. You can't. But you have to try, and you have to start now. And it's that moving toward that sense of accomplishment, that sense of personal ethics, that is meaningful to our practice. Wherever you are, you have to start now. I don't really imagine that you can truthfully say, I love all cockroaches and mosquitoes equal to myself. If you say that to me, I'll probably smile at you and say, good. Keep trying. Because I won't believe you. I really won't believe you. And if you say to me that, you can come from your sophisticated life and your sophisticated environment, and your highly cultural world, and you can go to a place like Calcutta, and look at the poor, and look at people with sores on them because they're so dirty. Look at people that are hungry. Look at lepers. And say that you know that they are of equal value to you. No way. That can't happen. You won't do that. I didn't do that. I went to Bombay and I saw the lepers. And at first, I couldn't bear it. I couldn't bear it. I didn't know there was suffering like that. I didn't know. Honestly didn't know. And when I saw it, I could not bear it. I started passing out dollar bills. The taxi driver that was driving us around said to me, please don't do that. Because first of all, it doesn't solve the problem. They're going to be hungry tomorrow also. And tomorrow, they're going to come up to my car and they're going to want another dollar bill. And I'm not going to be able to get through the streets of Calcutta because they're going to think that maybe you're in here again. And so I didn't know what to do. I broke the dollars down into smaller increments and began doing that. But I soon realized that pretty soon my dollars were going to run out. That was not a solution. That didn't work. But one thing that I found myself doing is I found myself, in order to cope with that level of suffering, I found myself saying, well, that's really too bad. I really grieve for them, but now I have to shut down, I have to shut down and I have to get through here. And I have to do what I need to do. So we haven't accomplished our practice. I don't think that I have. I'm still trying, though. I'm trying. I'm really trying. But I don't think I have. And I don't think you have either. But you have to start right where you are and do the best that you can. Continue. Adapt for your sense of personal ethical structure that's meaningful and real. And you have to live with yourself. That's literal. That's not just like, gee, I don't feel good about myself because I don't have a good personal ethical structure. What that means is you have to live with yourself. Whatever seeds you plant now, you will eat the fruit of that in the future. Trust me, this is true. If you are generous now, you will have plenty in the future. If you are true and faithful and honest and helpful and pure with your body, you will be beautiful in the future and healthy. If you preserve the life of all sentient beings equally and care about them equally, you will enjoy longevity in the future. These are the things that you have to live with. You will eat your cake. You might as well bake a good one. And that's the simple truth of the Buddhist teaching. If you only practice at that level, you're a Buddhist, at least in your heart, if not in your habits, in terms of spiritual practice. If you only practice at that level, in the heart, that is what the Buddha taught. An ethical structure that you can rely on. The interesting thing about this kind of practice is that it's the only thing that when you die you can actually take with you. All the things that you rely on, such as your personal wealth and your clothing and even the beauty that you have now, if you use your beauty incorrectly in this lifetime, for instance, if you use your beauty in the way that like a prostitute would do, in order to sell their body just to make some money, or if you use your beauty just because you like the thrill of having lots of people be admiring toward you, if you use your beauty in that way, and you're promiscuous like that, there's no sense of personal ethics in that. That's nothing. There's nothing for that. If you spend your beauty in that way, when you die, you can't take that beauty with you. That body's dead. It lays down and it turns to dust. There's nothing of that body. You take with that you have accumulated with that body, the habit, the path, the events that you have accumulated with that body, the sense of personal ethics that you have practiced with that body. That's what you get to take with you. And that's what you're going to be reborn with, and you will wear that as your clothing. And the body that you appear in next will not be so beautiful. So, when the time comes for you to leave this life, the Buddha teaches us that we cannot take with us so much as the weight of one sesame seed. Not even that much. But we do take with us the karma, cause and effect relationships that we have developed within our mind stream, that are within our mind. We do take with us the cause and effect relationships, the habitual tendencies that we have practiced. This content of our mind stream, this is what we take with us at the time of our death. It will be the conditions of our future. So to adapt to that is the beginning of true religion. That is the backbone and foundation of true religion. Without that, there is no religion and no faith. Without that, one cannot be an adequate human citizen. One cannot be an adequate participant in the community of sentient beings. And furthermore, and perhaps most importantly, because it's true that what we think about first is ourselves, most importantly, one cannot be happy. So please think about this, and if you are a Buddhist, mend your ways. And if you aren't a Buddhist, think about these things and adapt them as part of your personal spiritual structure. If you do that, then they are useful to you. If you do not do that, then perhaps all you've gotten out of this is that you should look up that comment, column by Irma Bombeck and get yourself some decent humor today. So I hope that you do practice accordingly and you do listen. That's when it becomes of value.
Thank you so much for joining us and for listening to this teaching by Jetsunma. They are all pre-recorded, these teachings, and they are shown on Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m., as well as you just did, Sundays at 11 a.m. Eastern Time on YouTube. So we invite you to listen anytime you wish, and they are also archived on YouTube. You can go back and watch them again. We also offer meditation Saturdays and Sundays at 10 a.m., and that's live in the prayer room as well as on YouTube. And let's see. And then every evening at 7 p.m. on Facebook, we have Medicine Buddha practice. It's a very, very short one in English. We invite you to join in there and offer up prayers for everyone you know who is in need of Medicine Buddha. In addition, we have a silk offering, which is a food offering ceremony to gain a lot of merit, we hope, so we can accomplish all of these things that she's, recommended that we do. The Buddha's recommended that we do. I think they're all recommending it. So this food offering, the silk, is Mondays through Friday at 5:30, with the exception of Thursdays, which is at 5. Then Saturdays also at noon, and Sundays at 2 p.m. Now the Monday through Saturdays are all on Zoom, and you can find that on the calendar on tara.org. That's and it's in 2 or 3 places, so you'll be able to find it. It's either come pray with us or on the meditate, pray, study section. There's the calendar page. So either one, you click on the event and it will tell you where to go, how to get there, and what the practice is, and you can join in. The 2 p.m. Rigzen Dupa is live actually at the Guru Rinpoche statue across the street, and all of these have a live component. Well, except for this, the recording teachings, but in the prayer room. And because the prayer room is now open daily from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., you can come and meditate, pray, join in the practice, whatever you'd like to do. And we invite you, we hope you do come. That's in addition to all of the outdoor activities that you can do, walking the meditation trails and so forth. So, and join the Guru Rinpoche, join the Rigzen Dupa live at the Guru Rinpoche. That's at 2 p.m. on Sundays. That's today. In addition, today is a drum circle. And that's at 4, right? Pretty much after the other practice, the Rigzen Dupa. So Rigzen Dupa gets cleaned up and the drums come out and everybody plays. So we hope that you come and enjoy. We're drumming for rain. Jetsunma's requested that we do that because it's very effective to just call out to the Buddhas for help. And Tara is the mantra they're doing. Om Tare Tu Tare Ture Soha. You can join in with just the mantra. You can bring your own drum. Whatever works for you. So that's what we offer, right? And we offer, the animals in the back, and just all sorts of things you can do here. And if you'd like to make an offering to Jetsunma, having received a teaching from her, you are always welcome to do that. Her PayPal number is jetsummagift@gmail.com. That's all one word, Jetsunma Gift, and it's in the chat there. So hope you can take advantage of that. Hope you can come and visit us live and enjoy everything here. We would really love to see you. And we've missed everyone through the last pandemic years, and we just can't wait to see you all back. So please come and have a wonderful week. Until next time.